Welcome back to the Sound for More channel. Today I have the pleasure to show you another Midi plugin from Alexey Nadzharov. Before I continue, I would like to remind my viewers to subscribe as it helps with growing the channel. Additionally, if you would like to participate in the giveaway, do follow the instruction contained in the video description. Thank you again. So this time it's about Midi delay. So let's create first an audio channel and then let's create a Midi channel. Inside this Midi channel, let's search for Midi delay. So you search for Midi and there it is, Midi delay. Okay, and that is the way it looks when you open it the first time. And there is a lot to go through on this plugin. So it is a Midi delay. Remember, it's a Midi plugin. So the delay is exercised on Midi signals, Midi events, not on audio. So that is quite important. Now, if you try to bring in another plugin, the reason I'm going to do this is to show you that this is part of a bundle now. So you can have it alongside Midi throughs and take a Midi, which I already covered previously in other tutorials. So have a look at that bundle of weirdly named Midi plugins. Okay, so we need to have an audio source because Midi delay is a Midi processor. So we can choose many different ones. So let's go for something like, why not, Piano Tech as a piano sound. Now, I'm going to connect Piano Tech to Midi delay. Okay, like so. And I'm going also to configure a little bit Piano Tech I'm going to decrease a little bit, or quite a bit actually, the volume, because what I find out is that as you test the Midi delay, sometimes it will play, you can play with velocity in terms of settings, and therefore it may go quite high in terms of velocity, depending of course on the configuration. Now, we need some Midi inputs, which will go into Midi delay. So we can either use a keyboard to start with, or for example, we can also use another Midi processor. So for example, we could bring in something like polybud, like so, and then configure for polybud to go directly here as a Midi input. I'm not going to do that. Maybe I'll do that later on in the video. But let's start with something very simple, because there are a lot of controls. This is one of those Midi plugin or Midi app that you either like it or not. It can get really complicated to the point that actually you don't know what is going on, but at the same time you know what is going on because what it is actually doing. I think when you have a lot of Midi input in the way that the delay will start to move, it will get so complex that it will almost sound like a generative type of Midi app. Now, there are two views as you go in. This is the simple view, and you can see that it is active here by this blue color on the word here on the button, simple. So that's something to remember, and the blue means is active. You click to disable that and you go to a more complex or advanced view where you have 8 different tap delays. Okay, so let's start with the simple one. Now you also see this letter A, B and C. This is where you can move between scenes, and in order to configure scenes you need to have on the XY pad this target to be on top of the scene. So you can move from A to B like so, and then you configure the parameters of that scene here on the left hand side. Okay, so and the idea is that you can move between different scenes. That is clear, that is simple. Now let's start with scene A. Now first of all, you can send through the signal directly to the target. So let's say I bring up the keyboard and I have through here and I press a note. You see the Midi event here. So you have this scrolling view, right? Which reminds you also of other apps from Alex and within the bundle as well. So you can see at the moment I have through actively sending through directly the events, the Midi events, which I trigger through the AUM keyboard. And that is a choice. You might want to have active there or not. So if you disable it, of course, now if I press on the keys, the AUM keyboard, you can see there are no MIDI events which are going to piano tech. Now, you don't hear also any delay. You don't hear any sound at all. In the simple view, you have only one delay. So first of all, you have a level here in terms of output. You can set a delay in terms of timing or set it manually. You can set the feedback. You can also have it to transpose up and down. You then can randomize the velocity. You can quantize by the nearest note or filter notes which are not active, which you do here on the keyboard. And then you can have the delay to, of course, influence pitch, velocity, and scale. If you are transposing and the pitch is off, it will not transpose, for example. And the same on velocity. If you don't have velocity active, it will not act on velocity. The same on scale. It will not quantize against scale, right? So if you were to increase the level and you press some notes, you still don't hear anything. That's because it's not active. You can see here, it says active. Click on it, it will become blues. Now, one of the things I find probably challenging is the use of colors. And sometimes, at least for me, when I started to use it, was it active or not based on the color? Perhaps the UI could do a little bit with a revamping on that. But anyway, press C4. You can see the event there. At the moment, I don't have through active and the notes are sent through. Now, in terms of delay, that is set to 0 milliseconds and the feedback is also to 0. So we could start now to increase the feedback like so. But of course, you need also to increase the delay in milliseconds, right? And you can hear there, you can see I pressed only one note and there are two, because the second one is part of the delay. Of course, how many notes you have in terms of the delay depends on the delay timings and also how long the feedback is, right? You see 3 in this case, all right? As I mentioned, you can quantize as well based on scale. So you can set here, so you can say, I don't want necessarily this note, I'll make it into a minor scale, up to you. Okay, and then therefore it will quantize based on the nearest note or will filter, will remove the notes. Of course, you need to have that active. Okay, the other thing I really like is that you can act on pitch as well. So let's activate pitch and also let's activate velocity as well. Let's bring up the keyboard again. Now you can hear you have more delays being activated there. Now let's transpose up and down. So you can see it's transposing up the following note from a delay point of view. So that is where it gets interesting, right? So if I was to connect now Polybud directly as a MIDI source into a MIDI delay. Here, of course, I have the same notes coming in. Perhaps I have them every half, like so, or perhaps every, why not, every bar, perhaps. And it doesn't matter the scale because I'm quantizing, but let's say that I'll make this simple, perhaps, you know, just only one note every bar. Okay, so let's open MIDI delay again and let's press play now. So you can hear the note here at the base is actually sent by Polybud, and then you see the delay acting on MIDI messaging. So that is really great, of course, but you need to be really careful because as you increase the feedback and as you increase the transposition, of course, you can get some really interesting effects. So let's try a bit. You can see I increased the transposition, so it's moving higher. Let's perhaps make the delay shorter and the feedback a little bit longer, and you can see it's starting to get a little bit more complex in terms of sound that it will produce for the delay effect. Okay, so hopefully the concept is clear now. In my view, it needs a little bit of work also on the UI. Sometimes it leaves artifacts which it clears up. Sometimes you have to clear here, pressing the clear button, and of course those artifacts will be clear on the screen and will stop only stacked notes, right? Now let's try velocity randomization as well in terms of percentage, and let's click play. Okay, so you can see how complicated it gets, but also how more interesting it's becoming, right? The real challenge, of course, becomes when you actually go in the more advanced mode. By the way, you can also act on filtering in terms of how you process some of the notes, but I'll cover that later on another video alongside a lot of other features, because it is actually, as I said, it could become quite complex in terms of the way you use it. And we haven't even started on morphing between the different scenes. But take these as an introductory tutorial. So click on Simple and you go to this view. Now here you can have up to 8 different delays, okay, separately with different settings here. Now, there is also a way that it can process events like CC messages as well. And underneath here in the bottom, there are different modes and algorithms that you will use in terms of how it allows we process the delay of the 8 different lines. Now, on the left-hand side, you still have the option for your scenes, but you have a couple of more options as well. So you can set minimum velocity, maximum velocity, and then you can also randomize the pitch, and you can have minimum randomization or maximum randomization, which you can act on it as well. So depending on how you configure each one of these delays, which by the way, you have to activate them as well. Depending on the algorithms that you choose here, you can have them in serials, in parallel, etc. You have a lot of different possibilities. Here, of course, you can change the timing and beats in terms of representation, the tempo, etc. But at the moment, we're using it inside AUM, so we use the host as a tempo, right? But let me show you just playing a little bit more with some of the controls. So you see activated filter, the first note is actually not being played. Now you hear only some notes which are fading away as a velocity, but let me show you what happens if you change the minimum velocity. So you can see already a lot of different effects. Double click, of course, to reset it to 0, for example, on the transpose setting here. Let's clear everything up. Okay, you can see some artifacts again that sometimes could be still rendered. Of course, this was running, that is why you had that notes still, but let's clear everything up. Now, let me show you a little bit the randomization, minimum and maximum randomization on the page, and this is active, of course, and the algorithm is fine there. So you can clearly see that you can start to now create interesting effects, as I would say. And of course, the way you use minimum and maximum randomization on the pitch alongside transposition will have an effect. And particularly if you don't allow the velocity to go down to a minimum of 0, of course, you will start to hear more of those MIDI events, and it will start to go it can go into this infinite loop of creating MIDI events, right? And of course, if you introduce other lane, you activate and you send a level and a delay, a feedback, etc., then it can get even more complicated. As I said, this is, probably one of the weaknesses, in my view, of the tool. It gives you a lot of power, a lot of controls, and it can get to a point where it's difficult to work out exactly what has happened because of incoming MIDI events, how they've been transposed, how they've been randomized in pitch, velocity, how they've been quantized against the scale or filter against a scale. And then if you have multiple taps, what is happening, which one are active, and of course, which algorithm is actually running, which one is selected. Of course, you can run the dice on all the scene, the delay and the time. So you can say delay and timing like so, and then play. So as you can see, sometimes you can get effects like this one. See, this now is not active. This one is active. So be careful in the way you actually use the dice, because you can get unpredictable effect effectively. So you can see here, this is active now. Let's activate this one again. Of course, we need to wait for also polybud to kick in. And for example, in that case, you couldn't hear the delay straight away because the delay time was quite high because I randomized around the dice against that. So, it's quite a powerful tool, really, really great. You can create some really nice, interesting effects, but at the same time, it can get really difficult to follow it through. But then it's also the beauty of the tool as well. I actually like to use the keyboard. So I think it becomes really interesting also when you have an additional one. So if you have an additional MIDI lane, and therefore, for example, here you have another MIDI delay, and I think it can get really interesting. For example, let's say that we have another audio source, and inside this audio source, we are going to load a bass zone. We connect it to the second instance of MIDI delay, like so. We connect the keyboard here as well to this MIDI delay. There you go. So the keyboard controls both these MIDI delays. And then you can start to configure this as well. And here perhaps we choose something not too powerful, so like a plug sound. We change the volume there as well. And now let's start to configure this. So as you can see, it's very easy to forget, for example, the level, and suddenly you don't hear the sound, the active button, or you don't have enough timing on the delay, on the feedback, or the algorithm, etc., etc. So, yeah. I also like to add some effects sometimes to make it more interesting, like for example stellar vox, and so that it can get a little bit more interesting even on the piano itself. Even if I know it's going to use a little bit more resources, I think it makes it a little bit less dry. And stellar vox is actually a fantastic tool anyway. Let's do randomization there, and like so. Okay, so hopefully you have a view now of what MIDI delay can do, an introduction, of course, to it. You can see also how it changes the interface depending on the size. So how it repositions, for example, where the scrolling area and the 4D visual of the MIDI event sit, right? You can have it down here, also on the right-hand side. But anyway, as I said, this is just an introduction to MIDI delay. I think it has great potential, absolutely. But it's one of those tools which you need to spend quite a bit of time to actually get the effect that you want. But at the same time, you could also get some very interesting generative type of composition as well. Okay, I hope you enjoyed the tutorial, and as always, see you next time. Bye.